Past Life Regression. Chapter 1. Do we live more than once? There's perhaps no question that has fascinated humanity longer than this. What happens after we die? For thousands of years, people have searched for answers. Every civilization, every religion, and nearly every culture has developed its own understanding of what lies beyond this life. Some believe in a permanent heaven or hell. Others believe consciousness simply ceases to exist. Still others believe that death is not an ending at all, but merely the beginning of another journey. Among the oldest and most enduring of these beliefs is the idea of reincarnation, the possibility that after death, the soul returns to live another life. It is a belief that has survived for thousands of years. It has crossed continents. It has appeared in religions, philosophies, tribal traditions, and even modern psychology. Today, millions of people around the world believe they have lived before. Some say they have remembered previous lives in dreams. Others claim memories emerged during meditation. Thousands more report vivid recollections while under hypnosis through a process known as past life regression. For some, these experiences are life-changing. They describe remembering another name, another family, another language, sometimes another century. Some believe they have witnessed their own deaths in another lifetime. Others report reliving moments of extraordinary happiness, heartbreak, triumph, or tragedy. Whether these memories are genuine glimpses into previous incarnations or remarkable creations of the human mind remains one of the most controversial questions in modern consciousness research. This audiobook explores that mystery. It does not ask you to believe, nor does it ask you to dismiss these experiences. Instead, it invites you to examine the evidence, hear the stories, explore the history, and consider the scientific and spiritual explanations that have emerged over the past century. The subject of past life regression sits at the intersection of psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, religion, and spirituality. It challenges many of our assumptions about memory, about identity, about consciousness itself. If our memories define who we are, what happens if memories appear that seem to belong to someone else? Could they be fragments of another lifetime? Or are they elaborate stories constructed by an incredibly creative subconscious mind? These questions have fascinated researchers for decades. Surprisingly, many of the people who undergo past life regression are not particularly interested in reincarnation before their sessions begin. Some seek help for unexplained fears. Others struggle with recurring nightmares. Some hope to understand powerful emotional patterns they cannot explain. Others simply wish to satisfy their curiosity. Yet many emerge convinced they have experienced something profoundly real. The emotional intensity of these sessions often surprises both clients and therapists. Individuals may cry while describing the loss of a child they have never known. They may grieve for a spouse who never existed in their present life. They sometimes speak unfamiliar names, describe ancient cities, or recount historical settings they claim never to have studied. Whether these details represent authentic memories, symbolic narratives, forgotten knowledge, or subconscious imagination remains the heart of an ongoing debate. Modern science has made extraordinary progress in understanding the human brain. Researchers can now observe brain activity with remarkable precision. They understand much about how memories form, how emotions influence recall, and how suggestion can shape what people believe they remember. Yet memory remains one of neuroscience's greatest mysteries. Contrary to popular belief, memories are not stored like videos inside the brain. Each time we remember something, the memory is reconstructed. Details may change. Emotions influence interpretation. New experiences subtly reshape old ones. This reconstructive nature of memory complicates the study of past life regression. If memories can change over time, how can researchers determine whether an apparent past life memory reflects an actual historical event, symbolic imagination, or something in between? The challenge is immense. Despite decades of investigation, there remains no universally accepted answer. Still, the stories continue. Some of the most intriguing cases involve very young children. Long before they are exposed to hypnosis or spiritual teachings, some children begin describing lives they insist they lived before. They speak of different parents, different homes, different occupations. Sometimes they insist that their current family is not their real family. In rare instances, researchers have investigated these claims and discovered historical details that appear surprisingly accurate. These cases have drawn international attention. Some scientists argue they deserve careful study. Others caution against drawing extraordinary conclusions from anecdotal evidence. The debate continues. Past life regression itself differs from these spontaneous childhood memories. Regression typically involves hypnosis or deep relaxation. A trained practitioner guides an individual into an altered state of awareness. The participant is encouraged to allow images, emotions, sensations, or impressions to emerge naturally. Sometimes nothing unusual happens. Sometimes vivid scenes appear almost immediately. Practitioners generally encourage clients not to force memories or invent stories. Instead, they are asked simply to describe whatever comes into awareness. A staircase. A doorway. A pair of unfamiliar shoes. An old farmhouse. A battlefield. A marketplace. The experience unfolds gradually. Often the first detail surprises the participant. As the session progresses, the scenes become increasingly vivid. Many describe not merely observing another life but experiencing it directly. They feel the emotions. They smell the surroundings. They hear unfamiliar voices. Some report physical sensations. Cold. Heat. Pain. Even injuries. When the session concludes, many say the memories remain astonishingly clear. Others remember only fragments. Interestingly, not everyone who experiences past life regression believes the memories are literally true. Some view them as symbolic stories created by the subconscious. Much like dreams. Even if the events never actually occurred, they may still reveal important emotional truths. Psychologists have long recognized that symbolic narratives can provide valuable therapeutic insights. Dreams frequently express fears, hopes, conflicts, and unresolved emotions through metaphor rather than literal events. Could past life regression function similarly? Some therapists believe so. Others disagree. Some regression practitioners are convinced they are helping clients access genuine memories carried by the soul across multiple lifetimes. Others avoid making any claims at all. Instead, they focus solely on whether the experience produces healing. If a person's lifelong fear disappears after a regression session, does it matter whether the memory represents a real past life? Opinions differ. The popularity of past life regression has grown enormously during the past 50 years. Books describing remarkable cases have become international bestsellers. Television documentaries have introduced millions of viewers to the subject. Online videos attract audiences numbering in the millions. Meditation recordings promising access to previous lives have become some of the most downloaded guided visualizations on the internet. Interest spans every continent. People from vastly different cultures report remarkably similar experiences. Some emerge believing they have lived as soldiers. Others remember being artists, farmers, merchants, monks, healers, kings, queens, ordinary laborers. Many lives appear completely unremarkable. Others unfold during famous moments in history. One of the more intriguing aspects of these reports is their emotional consistency. Individuals frequently return from regression sessions with profound insights. They forgive old grievances. Long-standing anxieties diminish. Relationships improve. Fear of death often decreases dramatically. Many report feeling deeply connected to humanity in a way they never experienced before. Whether these transformations result from spiritual awakening, psychological catharsis, or the healing power of storytelling remains an open question. Yet researchers acknowledge that meaningful personal change often follows emotionally powerful experiences, regardless of their ultimate origin. Throughout history, beliefs about reincarnation have shaped entire civilizations. They have influenced moral systems, legal traditions, religious practices, philosophical schools, ideas about justice, even concepts of destiny. The notion that today's actions influence future lives has inspired countless individuals to live with greater compassion and responsibility. Others reject reincarnation entirely, arguing that there is insufficient evidence to support its existence. Many scientists remain cautious. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Personal experiences, no matter how compelling, cannot alone establish universal truths. Yet science itself advances by investigating mysteries rather than dismissing them outright. History offers many examples of ideas once considered impossible that later became accepted through careful research. This does not mean every extraordinary claim proves true. It does suggest that curiosity remains essential. Past life regression occupies a unique place in that landscape of curiosity. It sits between science and spirituality, between psychology and philosophy, between objective investigation and deeply personal experience. Some approach it hoping to discover evidence of life beyond death. Others seek emotional healing. Still others simply wonder whether consciousness might be far more mysterious than current science fully understands. Perhaps the greatest lesson offered by this subject is humility. Human understanding continues to evolve. Questions once thought impossible to answer gradually become clearer as knowledge expands. Yet some mysteries remain. Past life regression invites us into one of those mysteries. It asks us to consider possibilities without demanding certainty, to listen without immediate judgment, to remain open while also thinking critically. The journey ahead will introduce remarkable historical figures, extraordinary personal accounts, groundbreaking researchers, skeptical investigations, and fascinating scientific theories. Some stories may inspire. Others may challenge deeply held beliefs. Together they form one of the most intriguing chapters in humanity's ongoing search to understand consciousness itself. Long before modern therapists guided people into hypnotic relaxation, long before psychologists debated the origins of unusual memories, ancient civilizations were already teaching that life did not end with death. To understand why past life regression continues captivating millions today, we must first travel back thousands of years to the civilizations where the idea of reincarnation first took root. Chapter 2: Ancient Beliefs about Reincarnation. Long before hypnosis, long before psychology, long before anyone spoke of past life regression, the idea that the soul survives death and returns in another body had already become one of humanity's oldest and most widespread beliefs. Thousands of years before modern civilization, our ancestors looked upon birth and death as part of an endless cycle. The seasons changed. The sun rose and set. The moon waxed and waned. Plants died in winter only to bloom again in spring. Nature itself seemed to demonstrate that endings were often new beginnings. It is perhaps not surprising that many ancient cultures came to believe the same pattern applied to human life. Death was not considered the final destination. Instead, it was viewed as a doorway, a transition, the beginning of another chapter in an endless journey of the soul. Although every civilization explained reincarnation differently, remarkable similarities appear across continents that had little or no contact with one another. Some believed the soul returned almost immediately. Others believed it spent years in a spiritual realm before beginning another earthly existence. Still others imagined a complex cycle involving judgment, purification, and spiritual advancement. Yet beneath these differences lay a common thread. Life was not a single event. It was part of something much larger. One of the earliest civilizations to wrestle with these ideas was ancient Egypt. To the Egyptians, death occupied a central place in both religion and daily life. The pyramids, temples, and elaborate tombs they constructed reflected an extraordinary belief that consciousness continued after physical death. Although traditional Egyptian beliefs focus more on the continuation of life in the afterworld than repeated earthly reincarnation, some later Egyptian mystical traditions hinted that the soul could return in different forms. The Egyptians believed every individual possessed multiple spiritual components. Among them were the Ka, often described as one's life force, and the Ba, representing personality and individuality. Following death, these spiritual aspects separated from the physical body but continued to exist. Success in the afterlife depended upon living a life in harmony with Ma'at, the principle of truth, balance, justice, and cosmic order. The famous weighing of the heart ceremony illustrates this beautifully. According to Egyptian belief, after death the heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. A heart made heavy by selfishness, cruelty, or dishonesty could not continue its journey. Whether viewed literally or symbolically, the message was clear. How one lived mattered. Although this differs from the later concept of reincarnation found in Eastern religions, it established an important foundation. Death was not annihilation. Consciousness endured. Elsewhere, even more detailed ideas about reincarnation were developing. No civilization embraced reincarnation more deeply than ancient India. Here, the concept became woven into religion, philosophy, ethics, and everyday life. The earliest references appear in the Upanishads, sacred texts composed more than 2,000 years ago. These writings introduced ideas that continue to influence hundreds of millions of people today. Central among them is the concept of samsara. Samsara refers to the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. According to Hindu philosophy, the soul, or Atman, is eternal. The body ages. The body dies. But the soul continues. After death, it enters another physical existence. Exactly what kind of life follows depends upon karma. Karma is often misunderstood. It is not simply reward and punishment. Instead, karma refers to the natural consequences of one's thoughts, intentions, and actions. Every action leaves an imprint. Every choice shapes future experience. Good actions generate positive consequences. Selfish or harmful actions create obstacles that must eventually be resolved. Importantly, karma is not viewed as divine revenge. Rather, it functions as a universal law of cause and effect. Much as gravity governs the physical world, karma governs moral and spiritual development. Over countless lifetimes, the soul gradually learns compassion, wisdom, patience, and selflessness. Eventually, it reaches moksha, the liberation from the cycle of rebirth. At that point, the soul no longer needs to return to earthly existence. Instead, it reunites with ultimate reality. These ideas profoundly influence neighboring cultures. Perhaps none more significantly than Buddhism. Although Buddhism emerged from Hindu traditions, it introduced important differences. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, accepted the existence of rebirth but questioned the idea of an eternal, unchanging soul. Instead, Buddhism teaches the principle of anatta, often translated as no permanent self. This can seem confusing at first. If there is no permanent soul, what is reborn? The Buddha compared existence to the flame of one candle lighting another. The second flame continues the first without being identical to it. In other words, consciousness continues through an unbroken chain of causes and conditions. Our actions shape future existence, but no fixed personality travels intact from one life to another. Buddhism also emphasizes karma. However, the goal is not merely obtaining a better rebirth. The ultimate objective is enlightenment. Freedom from suffering. Freedom from attachment. Freedom from the endless cycle of rebirth itself. Through meditation, ethical living, and wisdom, practitioners seek nirvana, the complete cessation of suffering. Today, these teachings continue to influence hundreds of millions of Buddhists across Asia and throughout the world. Meanwhile, other ancient civilizations developed remarkably similar ideas. Among the Greeks, the philosopher Pythagoras became one of the earliest Western advocates of reincarnation. Most people remember Pythagoras for mathematics. His famous theorem remains one of the foundations of geometry. Yet he also belonged to a mystical tradition that taught the immortality of the soul. According to ancient accounts, Pythagoras claimed to remember several of his previous lives. He believed the soul survived death and repeatedly returned to learn moral lessons. His followers adopted strict ethical principles based partly upon this belief. Several generations later, Plato expanded these ideas. In works such as the Republic and Phaedrus, Plato described the soul as existing before birth and surviving after death. One of his most famous passages is known as the myth of Aer. In this remarkable story, a soldier named Aer dies in battle but later returns to life. He describes witnessing souls choosing the circumstances of their next earthly lives before returning to the physical world. Some choose wisely. Others repeat old mistakes. The account bears striking similarities to modern reports from individuals who claim to remember selecting their next incarnation before birth. Whether Plato intended the story as literal truth or philosophical allegory remains debated. Nevertheless, it demonstrates that ideas resembling modern reincarnation existed in ancient Greece over 2,000 years ago. The Celtic peoples of Europe also appear to have embraced related beliefs. Roman historians wrote that the Druids taught the immortality of the soul. Julius Caesar himself observed that many Celtic warriors seemed unusually fearless in battle because they believed death was not the end. Although much of Druidic teaching has been lost, surviving accounts suggest they viewed life as part of a continuing spiritual journey. Elsewhere across the globe, indigenous traditions developed their own understandings of returning souls. Among certain Native American tribes, children occasionally received the names of ancestors believed to have returned within the family. Some Inuit communities carefully observed newborns for personality traits resembling deceased relatives. When similarities appeared, they were often welcomed as evidence that a beloved family member had returned. Across Africa, numerous traditional belief systems also describe ancestral spirits remaining actively involved with the living. In some cultures, newborn children displaying characteristics associated with recently deceased relatives were believed to carry aspects of those ancestors into a new life. While these beliefs differ significantly from the formal doctrines of Hinduism or Buddhism, they reveal humanity's widespread intuition that death may not represent a final ending. China contributed its own unique perspectives. Although Confucianism emphasized ethical living and social harmony rather than reincarnation, Taoist and Buddhist influences gradually introduced concepts of repeated lives. Chinese folklore became rich with stories describing souls traveling through spiritual realms before returning to Earth. Many legends tell of a mysterious river that souls must cross. Before reincarnation, they drink a potion that causes them to forget previous lives. Only then can they begin anew. Interestingly, modern past life regression often involves individuals claiming to recover memories they believe were forgotten at birth. Whether coincidence or cultural influence, the parallel is fascinating. One of history's greatest religious mysteries concerns the role of reincarnation in early Christianity. The New Testament contains passages that some scholars believe hint at pre-existing souls. One example appears when Jesus is asked whether John the Baptist fulfilled the role of Elijah. Some interpret this symbolically. Others see possible references to reincarnation. During Christianity's earliest centuries, several theologians explored ideas about the soul's existence before birth. Perhaps the most well-known was Origen of Alexandria. Writing in the 3rd century, Origen suggested that souls existed prior to earthly life. Although his views remain controversial and do not align with mainstream Christian doctrine, they demonstrate that early debates about the soul's origin were more diverse than many people realize. Eventually, church councils rejected teachings associated with pre-existent souls and reincarnation. By the Middle Ages, the doctrine had largely disappeared from Orthodox Christian teaching. Nevertheless, belief in reincarnation survived quietly in certain mystical groups throughout Europe. From India to Greece. From Egypt to China. From Celtic Europe to indigenous cultures across the Americas. The idea that life continues beyond death appeared again and again. Each civilization interpreted the mystery through its own language, its own symbols, its own religious framework. Yet remarkably similar themes emerged. The soul survives. Life has purpose. Actions matter. Growth continues. Death is not the end. Centuries later, these ancient ideas would inspire philosophers, mystics, psychologists, and eventually physicians who began asking a remarkable question. If reincarnation is more than mythology, could it be remembered? And if so, how? That question would remain largely unanswered until an entirely different field of study emerged. Not religion. Not philosophy. But the strange and fascinating science of hypnosis. Chapter 3: The Birth of Modern Past Life Regression. For thousands of years, belief in reincarnation belonged almost exclusively to the worlds of religion and philosophy. It was discussed by priests, debated by scholars, contemplated by mystics, accepted as spiritual truth by some, rejected entirely by others. Very few imagined that one day the subject would become part of psychological research. That transformation began with an entirely unexpected discovery: hypnosis. Today, hypnosis is commonly associated with therapy, stage performances, or guided relaxation. Yet its history stretches back much further and begins with one of the most controversial figures in medical history. His name was Franz Anton Mesmer. Born in Austria in 1734, Mesmer believed that an invisible force flowed through every living thing. He called this force animal magnetism. According to Mesmer, illness occurred when this natural energy became blocked or imbalanced. By manipulating the invisible magnetic fluid, he believed healing could take place. Modern science does not support Mesmer's theories about magnetism. Nevertheless, something remarkable happened during his treatments. Many patients entered unusual states of consciousness. Some reported vivid memories. Others experienced emotional breakthroughs. Some seemed temporarily relieved of physical symptoms. Although Mesmer misunderstood what was happening, he had unintentionally opened the door to an entirely new field of study. Eventually, investigators concluded that no mysterious magnetic force existed. Instead, the effects appeared to arise from the remarkable power of focused attention, suggestion, and the human mind itself. Several decades later, a Scottish physician named James Braid carefully observed demonstrations that had once been attributed to Mesmer's magnetic abilities. Braid noticed something important. The altered state did not depend upon magnets at all. It resulted from intense concentration. He coined a new term for the phenomenon: hypnosis. The word comes from hypnos, the Greek god of sleep. Ironically, hypnosis is not actually sleep. Modern brain imaging shows that hypnotized individuals remain awake and aware. Rather than losing consciousness, they enter a state of highly focused attention. Outside distractions fade. Imagination becomes more vivid. Suggestions may be experienced with remarkable realism. Braid's work transformed hypnosis from mystical curiosity into a legitimate subject of medical investigation. During the 19th century, physicians across Europe began experimenting with hypnosis as a treatment for pain, anxiety, and psychological disorders. Long before the invention of modern anesthetics, some surgeons even performed operations on hypnotized patients. Reports described individuals remaining calm during procedures that would otherwise have been unbearable. Not every physician accepted these accounts. Some remained deeply skeptical. Yet enough successful cases accumulated that hypnosis gradually earned a place within medical practice. One of the next major advances came from French neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot. Working at the famous Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris, Charcot used hypnosis to study hysteria, a condition now understood as a collection of neurological and psychological symptoms. Among his students was a young Austrian physician who would later revolutionize psychology: Sigmund Freud. Freud initially experimented with hypnosis while treating patients suffering from emotional trauma. He observed that forgotten memories sometimes emerged during hypnotic sessions. When these buried experiences resurfaced, emotional symptoms occasionally improved. Eventually, Freud abandoned hypnosis in favor of free association and psychoanalysis. Nevertheless, his early work helped establish an important principle. The unconscious mind stores far more information than ordinary awareness can easily access. Around the same time, another influential thinker was developing very different ideas. Carl Gustav Jung, originally one of Freud's closest colleagues, believed the unconscious extended beyond personal memories. He proposed the existence of what he called the collective unconscious. According to Jung, humanity shares deep symbolic patterns inherited across generations. These universal images, known as archetypes, appear in myths, dreams, religions, and cultures throughout history. The wise old man, the great mother, the hero, the shadow, the child. Although Jung rarely endorsed claims of literal past life memories, he acknowledged that some dreams and visions seemed impossible to explain through personal experience alone. He remained open to the possibility that the human psyche possessed depths still poorly understood. His ideas would later influence many therapists exploring past life regression. By the early 20th century, hypnosis had become an accepted therapeutic tool in many parts of the world. Psychologists used it to help patients recover forgotten memories, overcome fears, reduce chronic pain, and break unwanted habits. Yet almost no one intentionally searched for previous lifetimes. That changed largely by accident. Occasionally, while hypnotized, patients began describing scenes that appeared unrelated to their current lives. Some suddenly spoke with unfamiliar accents. Others described ancient villages, historical clothing, forgotten customs, or occupations that no longer existed. At first, therapists assumed these scenes represented dreams or imagination. After all, hypnosis greatly enhances creativity. The subconscious mind can produce astonishingly detailed stories. However, something curious began happening. Some individuals supplied names, dates, and locations that researchers later discovered actually existed. These cases remained rare. Most regressions produced no verifiable historical information. Yet the handful that appeared unusually accurate attracted growing attention. One of the earliest widely publicized cases involved an American woman known as Bridie Murphy. In the early 1950s, amateur hypnotist Maury Bernstein conducted a series of regression sessions with Virginia Tighe, an ordinary housewife living in Colorado. During hypnosis, she began speaking with what sounded like an Irish accent. She claimed to be an Irish woman named Bridie Murphy, born in the late 18th century. She described childhood memories, local customs, family members, and details of life in Ireland. When Bernstein published the sessions, they became an international sensation. Newspapers across the world covered the story. Books flew off store shelves. Radio programs debated the evidence. Some investigators traveled to Ireland searching for confirmation. They found certain details that appeared historically accurate. Other claims proved impossible to verify. Still others were shown to be mistaken. Skeptics eventually suggested that Virginia may have unconsciously absorbed Irish information during childhood and unknowingly reproduced it while hypnotized. Psychologists call this phenomenon cryptomnesia. Cryptomnesia occurs when forgotten information resurfaces without the individual realizing where it originated. Someone may sincerely believe an idea is entirely new when it is actually a forgotten memory. The Bridie Murphy case remains one of the best-known examples in the history of past life regression because it illustrates both the excitement and the difficulties surrounding the subject. Supporters saw compelling evidence for reincarnation. Critics saw an extraordinary example of unconscious memory. Neither side convinced the other. As interest spread, more therapists began experimenting with regression techniques. Some reported dramatic emotional healing. Patients overcame lifelong fears. Chronic anxieties diminished. Persistent emotional patterns suddenly made sense within the context of an apparent previous lifetime. Others remained unconvinced. Could the therapeutic benefits simply result from symbolic storytelling? Modern psychotherapy already recognized that emotionally meaningful narratives often produce healing. Perhaps it mattered less whether the memories were historically true than whether they allowed individuals to resolve deeply buried emotions. This practical viewpoint gradually gained support among many therapists. The question shifted. Instead of asking only, "Is it real?" some began asking, "Does it help?" For certain patients, the answer appeared to be yes. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, interest continued growing. Hypnotherapists refined their methods. Guided relaxation techniques became increasingly sophisticated. Researchers explored altered states of consciousness using new psychological models. Meanwhile, public fascination with spirituality expanded dramatically. Books on meditation, Eastern philosophy, and consciousness filled bookstore shelves. The idea that hidden memories might lie buried within the subconscious captivated millions. Then, during the late 1970s, an event occurred that would transform past life regression forever. It involved a highly respected psychiatrist, a successful medical doctor, a university professor, a man who initially rejected reincarnation entirely. His name was Dr. Brian Weiss. He had no intention of becoming one of the world's best-known advocates of past life regression. In fact, he considered the entire subject highly improbable. Everything changed because of a single patient. Her name was Catherine. Neither of them realized that their therapy sessions would eventually become one of the most influential stories ever written about reincarnation. Their extraordinary journey would inspire millions of readers, introduce past life regression to mainstream audiences across the globe, and spark debates that continue to this very day. That remarkable story begins in the next chapter. Chapter 4: Dr. Brian Weiss and Many Lives, Many Masters. Few individuals have influenced the modern study of past life regression more than Dr. Brian Weiss. Unlike many of the early researchers who explored reincarnation from a spiritual or philosophical perspective, Weiss came from the world of conventional medicine. He was not seeking proof of previous lives. He was not searching for evidence of the supernatural. In fact, he considered the very idea highly unlikely. His career had been built upon science. Born in New York in 1944, Brian Leslie Weiss excelled academically from an early age. He graduated from Columbia University before earning his medical degree at Yale University School of Medicine, one of the most respected medical institutions in the United States. Following medical school, he completed his internship and residency, specializing in psychiatry. Over the years, Weiss built an impressive professional reputation. He became chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami, Florida. His work focused on traditional psychiatric treatment, medication, psychotherapy, clinical diagnosis, evidence-based medicine. Like most psychiatrists of his generation, Weiss viewed hypnosis as a legitimate therapeutic tool when used carefully. However, he had little interest in reincarnation. If someone had suggested that memories from previous lives could emerge during therapy, he almost certainly would have dismissed the idea. Everything changed in 1980. That year, Weiss began treating a 27-year-old woman whom he refers to in his book simply as Catherine. She was intelligent, successful, and deeply troubled. For years she had suffered from severe anxiety, recurring panic attacks, crippling phobias, nightmares, an overwhelming fear of choking, an unexplained terror of water. Conventional therapy had brought little improvement. Medication provided only temporary relief. Nothing seemed to reach the deeper causes of her suffering. Eventually, Weiss suggested hypnosis. At the time, hypnosis was simply another therapeutic technique. His intention was straightforward. Perhaps Catherine could recover forgotten childhood memories that might explain the origins of her fears. During one of their early hypnotic sessions, Weiss instructed Catherine to return to the earliest event connected with her anxiety. Instead of describing her childhood, she began speaking about an entirely different life. She said she was living thousands of years ago. She described a dusty landscape, simple buildings, a marketplace, a family unlike her own. She gave details that seemed completely unrelated to anything in her current life. At first, Weiss assumed she was imagining the entire scene. Hypnosis often encourages vivid visualization. The subconscious mind can create extraordinarily detailed stories. He allowed the session to continue. To his surprise, Catherine became intensely emotional. She described watching floodwaters rushing toward her village. She struggled to save her infant child. She spoke of drowning. As she relived the experience, her body reacted physically. Her breathing became rapid. Her muscles tensed. Tears streamed down her face. Then, the scene ended. When Catherine emerged from hypnosis, something remarkable happened. One of her lifelong phobias had significantly diminished. Neither Weiss nor Catherine understood why. Perhaps it was coincidence. Perhaps the emotional release itself had therapeutic value. They continued their sessions. Again and again, Catherine described different historical lives. A servant in one lifetime. A student in another. A peasant. A merchant. A victim of disease. A soldier. She claimed to experience each life directly. The emotions felt entirely real. Each apparent lifetime seemed connected to fears or emotional patterns she carried into her present life. As therapy progressed, her symptoms continued improving. Her panic attacks became less frequent. Her anxieties gradually weakened. Nightmares disappeared. Weiss remained skeptical. Although fascinated by Catherine's responses, he still assumed the scenes originated within her imagination. Then something occurred that challenged everything he believed. During one hypnosis session, Catherine's voice suddenly changed. She no longer described a historical lifetime. Instead, she claimed to be speaking from what she called a spiritual realm between lives. She referred to entities she identified as the Masters. According to Catherine, these highly evolved spiritual beings possessed wisdom far beyond ordinary human understanding. Then came something Weiss could not easily explain. The voices began describing intensely personal details about his own life. They spoke about his father, his son. Private family matters Catherine had no apparent way of knowing. Most profoundly, they referred to the death of Weiss's infant son, Jordan. This tragedy had devastated Weiss and his wife years earlier. He had shared this information with almost no one. Certainly not with Catherine. Yet during hypnosis she spoke about it with extraordinary accuracy. The experience shook him deeply. Could Catherine somehow have learned these details? Was it coincidence? Extraordinary intuition? Telepathy? Or something else entirely? Weiss searched desperately for ordinary explanations. He found none that fully satisfied him. The sessions continued. Again the mysterious communications returned. The beings spoke about the purpose of life. About patience. About compassion. About learning through experience. One message would later become especially famous. There are many gods, for God is in each of us. Another suggested that human beings repeatedly return to Earth in order to learn lessons impossible to master in a single lifetime. Love. Forgiveness. Kindness. Humility. Wisdom. Only after enough spiritual growth does the soul no longer require physical reincarnation. Weiss later admitted that these experiences forced him to question everything he thought he knew about consciousness. He did not suddenly abandon science. Nor did he claim absolute proof of reincarnation. Instead, he found himself confronting experiences that conventional psychiatric theories struggled to explain. For several years, he told almost no one. He worried about his professional reputation. Psychiatry was, and remains, a highly scientific discipline. Publicly discussing apparent past life memories risked ridicule. Colleagues might question his judgment. Patients could lose confidence. Academic opportunities might disappear. Eventually, however, Weiss concluded that remaining silent would be intellectually dishonest. He believed the experiences deserved public discussion, regardless of whether readers ultimately accepted his conclusions. In 1988, he published Many Lives, Many Masters. The book described his work with Catherine and the astonishing therapy sessions that had transformed both doctor and patient. Initially, publishers expected modest sales. Instead, the book became an international bestseller. It was translated into dozens of languages. Millions of copies were sold worldwide. Readers found themselves captivated by the possibility that emotional wounds might transcend a single lifetime. Many wrote to Weiss describing experiences that resembled Catherine's. Some claimed spontaneous memories from childhood. Others reported vivid dreams. Thousands sought past life regression therapy for themselves. Almost overnight, Brian Weiss became the world's most recognizable advocate of regression therapy. His lectures filled auditoriums across Europe, Asia, Australia, and the Americas. Workshops attracted physicians, psychologists, therapists, clergy, and ordinary individuals simply curious about the mysteries of consciousness. Weiss went on to publish several additional books, including Through Time into Healing, Only Love is Real, Messages from the Masters, and Same Soul, Many Bodies. Across these works, he expanded upon themes first introduced through Catherine's case. He proposed that souls often reincarnate together. Family members may return in different relationships. A mother in one life might become a daughter in another. Close friends may repeatedly encounter one another across centuries. The purpose, he suggested, is continued learning and spiritual growth. These ideas resonated strongly with many readers. Others remained unconvinced. Critics pointed out that many masters relied primarily upon personal testimony. No independent recordings or historical verification could conclusively establish that Catherine's memories reflected actual previous lives. Psychologists proposed alternative explanations. Perhaps hypnosis encouraged elaborate fantasy. Perhaps unconscious suggestion shaped the narratives. Perhaps cryptomnesia allowed forgotten historical information to resurface. Others questioned whether Weiss himself, despite his best intentions, might unknowingly have influenced Catherine's responses through subtle verbal cues. Such concerns are well documented within hypnosis research. Participants often attempt to satisfy perceived expectations. Even experienced therapists can unintentionally guide sessions without realizing it. Weiss acknowledged many of these criticisms. He repeatedly emphasized that he did not claim scientific proof. Instead, he argued that the profound therapeutic improvements experienced by many patients deserved careful investigation. Regardless of one's interpretation, the healing appeared genuine. Phobias diminished. Grief softened. Relationships improved. Fear of death often disappeared entirely. These changes became difficult to ignore. Today, opinions regarding Brian Weiss remain divided. To supporters, he courageously challenged conventional assumptions and opened an entirely new field of therapeutic exploration. To skeptics, he unintentionally popularized a form of therapy built upon unverifiable experiences. Both perspectives continue to shape the ongoing discussion. Yet one fact remains beyond dispute. Before many lives, many masters, relatively few people had heard of past life regression. After its publication, millions had. The book transformed what had once been a little-known therapeutic curiosity into an international phenomenon. Suddenly, people everywhere began asking the same question. If hidden memories truly exist, how are they accessed? What actually happens during a past life regression session? And why do so many people report experiences that feel more real than ordinary memory itself? To answer those questions, we must step inside the therapy room and experience, step by step, what a typical past life regression session is said to be like. Chapter 5: What happens during a past life regression? Imagine walking into a quiet room. The lights are soft. The atmosphere is calm. There are no flashing machines. No mysterious equipment. No elaborate rituals. Only 2 comfortable chairs, or perhaps a reclining couch, and a trained practitioner whose purpose is to guide you into a deeply relaxed state of awareness. Contrary to what many people imagine, a past life regression session bears little resemblance to the dramatic scenes often portrayed in movies. There is no swinging pocket watch. No loss of control. No magical trance. Instead, most sessions begin much like an ordinary conversation. The therapist spends time getting to know the client. Why are they there? What do they hope to understand? Are they struggling with anxiety? A recurring dream? An unexplained fear? A relationship that seems strangely familiar? Or are they simply curious about the possibility of previous lives? For ethical practitioners, these initial conversations are extremely important. Regression should never be presented as a guaranteed method for uncovering historical truth. Instead, clients are encouraged to approach the experience with curiosity rather than certainty. Whatever emerges, whether symbolic, psychological, or something more mysterious, is explored without making assumptions. Once the discussion is complete, the relaxation process begins. The client is usually invited to close their eyes. Attention turns toward breathing. Slow, deep, steady. Each breath allows the body to relax a little more. The muscles soften. The heartbeat slows. Outside distractions gradually fade into the background. Many practitioners then guide clients through what psychologists call a progressive relaxation exercise. Attention moves slowly through the body. The feet relax. The legs become heavy. The stomach softens. The shoulders release tension. The jaw loosens. Even the tiny muscles surrounding the eyes begin to relax. As physical tension disappears, mental activity often changes as well. Thoughts become quieter. Images become more vivid. Many people describe feeling as though they are drifting somewhere between wakefulness and sleep. Yet they remain aware of everything around them. This is one of the biggest misconceptions about hypnosis. People do not lose consciousness. Brain imaging studies show that individuals under hypnosis remain awake. They hear the therapist's voice. They can respond to questions. Most remember the session afterward. In many ways, hypnosis resembles becoming completely absorbed in a good novel or an engaging movie. The outside world temporarily fades while attention becomes intensely focused. Once this relaxed state has been established, the therapist begins offering gentle suggestions. These suggestions vary considerably from one practitioner to another. Some invite clients to imagine walking down a staircase. Each step represents a deeper level of relaxation. Others describe floating peacefully through clouds, walking along a quiet beach, entering a peaceful garden, moving through a beautiful forest. The imagery itself is not considered important. Its purpose is simply to quiet the analytical mind and encourage deeper concentration. Eventually, the therapist may suggest approaching a doorway. Behind that doorway, they explain, may lie an important memory. Some practitioners intentionally avoid mentioning past lives at this stage. Instead, they use neutral language. Allow yourself to move toward the memory most important for you today. This approach attempts to reduce unconscious suggestion. The therapist does not tell the client what they should experience. The client simply reports whatever appears. Sometimes, nothing happens. This surprises many people. Not everyone enters hypnosis equally easily. Some remain too analytical. Others become distracted. Some simply do not visualize naturally. In these cases, practitioners generally avoid forcing the experience. Relaxation alone may still prove beneficial. On other occasions, something unexpected begins almost immediately. A client may suddenly describe standing in a field, walking through an unfamiliar village, looking down at clothing unlike anything they have ever worn. Interestingly, therapists often begin by asking one very simple question. Look down at your feet. It seems almost insignificant. Yet many regression practitioners say this question helps anchor the experience. Instead of asking, "Who are you?" which encourages interpretation, they ask, "What do you see?" Perhaps leather sandals, bare feet, heavy boots, wooden clogs, simple shoes. The description gradually expands. What are you wearing? What season does it appear to be? Are you indoors or outside? What do you notice around you? The therapist avoids supplying answers. Instead, they encourage observation. Some clients describe ancient cities. Others find themselves on farms, ships, battlefields, markets, temples, castles, ordinary homes. Many apparent past lives are surprisingly ordinary. Not every regression reveals kings or queens. Many people report living simple lives. Mothers raising children. Farmers tending fields. Merchants selling goods. Craftsmen building furniture. Teachers. Fishermen. Servants. Laborers. These ordinary details often surprise participants who expected something dramatic. As the scene develops, emotions frequently become more important than visual details. The therapist may ask, "How old are you? How do you feel? What is happening?" Clients often answer spontaneously. Some smile. Others become tearful. Many report emotions that seem entirely separate from anything occurring in their present lives. One woman described overwhelming grief while watching her husband leave for war. Another experienced profound joy while holding a newborn child. A man reported intense guilt after abandoning a close friend during a battle centuries earlier. Whether these experiences reflect genuine memories or symbolic stories, the emotional responses are often remarkably authentic. Physiological measurements sometimes reveal increased heart rate, rapid breathing, tear production, changes in facial expression. The body often reacts as though the events are happening in the present moment. Eventually, practitioners encourage clients to move forward in time. What happens next? What is the next important event? Sometimes years pass within moments. Clients describe marriages, families, careers, loss, illness, triumph, failure. Entire lifetimes unfold within a single therapy session. Then comes the moment nearly every regression therapist eventually explores: the death scene. Although this sounds frightening, practitioners generally approach it carefully. The client is reminded that they are perfectly safe. They are observing, not reliving physical pain. Many therapists believe the death scene often provides the greatest emotional insight. Clients describe illnesses, accidents, old age, natural disasters, war. Some report peaceful transitions. Others describe sudden endings. Interestingly, most participants say that after the moment of death, fear disappears almost instantly. Many describe floating above their body. Others report feelings strikingly similar to modern near-death experiences: peace, freedom, lightness. Some claim to encounter deceased relatives. Others describe guides or beings of light. Still others report entering beautiful landscapes or peaceful spiritual environments. These similarities between past life regression and near-death experiences have fascinated researchers for decades. Are they drawing upon similar psychological processes? The same subconscious imagery? Or something deeper? No one knows. After exploring the apparent lifetime, therapists often ask one final question: what lesson did this life teach you? This may be the most important part of the entire session. Regardless of whether the experience represents literal history, symbolic storytelling, or unconscious imagination, participants frequently identify powerful themes: forgiveness, patience, compassion, courage, humility, acceptance. Many describe recognizing patterns that continue into their present lives: a fear of abandonment, difficulty trusting others, an unexplained attraction to certain places, persistent relationship conflicts. Whether these connections arise from actual previous incarnations or meaningful psychological symbolism remains a matter of interpretation. Yet participants often leave feeling they understand themselves more deeply. Some sessions conclude there. Others continue beyond the apparent death. Many regression practitioners believe consciousness enters what they call the between-life state. Clients sometimes describe reviewing the lifetime they have just experienced, meeting spiritual teachers, planning future incarnations. discussing lessons still to be learned. These reports closely resemble descriptions found in certain religious traditions and modern near-death experience literature. However, not every practitioner encourages exploration of this phase. Some prefer to remain focused on therapeutic goals rather than spiritual interpretation. Once the session is complete, the therapist gradually guides the client back to ordinary awareness. Attention returns to breathing, to the room, to the present moment. The eyes open. Most people feel relaxed, calm. Some describe profound peace lasting for hours or even days. Others feel emotionally exhausted after revisiting deeply moving experiences. Many spend considerable time reflecting upon what they experienced. Some become convinced they have genuinely remembered another lifetime. Others remain uncertain. They acknowledge the emotional power of the experience while questioning its literal accuracy. Interestingly, skilled practitioners generally discourage immediate conclusions. Instead of declaring, "that was definitely a past life," they encourage thoughtful reflection. Could the experience represent symbolic healing? An unconscious metaphor? Forgotten historical knowledge? Or an authentic memory carried across lifetimes? The answer may differ for each individual. One of the most remarkable aspects of past life regression is that participants often describe the experience as more vivid than ordinary imagination. Colors appear brighter. Emotions feel deeper. Details seem astonishingly clear. Many insist they are not inventing the scenes. Rather, they feel as though they are remembering them. Whether that sensation reflects reality or the extraordinary creative capacity of the subconscious remains one of the central questions surrounding regression therapy. As interest in these experiences grew, researchers began searching for the most compelling examples. Cases in which apparent memories contained historical details. Cases involving children who spoke of previous lives before learning about reincarnation. Cases that challenged easy explanations. Some became famous throughout the world. Others remain among the most intriguing unsolved mysteries in consciousness research. It is to those extraordinary cases that we now turn. Chapter 6: Famous Past Life Cases. Throughout the history of past life regression and reincarnation research, thousands of individuals have claimed to remember previous lives. Most of these accounts remain deeply personal. They are meaningful to the people who experience them but contain little information that can be independently verified. From a scientific standpoint, such cases are difficult to evaluate. Memories alone cannot establish historical fact. Yet every so often, a case emerges that attracts international attention. Not because it proves reincarnation, but because it raises questions that are not easily answered. Some involve adults under hypnosis. Others involve very young children who begin speaking about another life long before anyone introduces them to the concept of reincarnation. These are the stories that continue to fascinate researchers around the world. Perhaps no case is more famous than that of Bridie Murphy. In the early 1950s, amateur hypnotist Maury Bernstein conducted a series of hypnosis sessions with an American woman named Virginia Tighe. During deep hypnosis, Virginia claimed that she was no longer living in 20th century America. Instead, she identified herself as Bridie Murphy, a woman born in Cork, Ireland, in the late 18th century. As the sessions continued, she described her childhood home, her parents, local customs, the layout of streets, traditional songs, everyday routines. She even spoke with what listeners believed sounded like an Irish accent. When Bernstein published the transcripts, the public was captivated. Millions purchased the book. Newspapers covered the story almost daily. Television and radio programs debated whether genuine memories from another lifetime had finally been uncovered. Investigators traveled to Ireland in search of evidence. Some of the locations Virginia described appeared to correspond with real places. Certain customs matched historical records. Other details, however, could not be verified. Some names could not be located in official records. A number of historical descriptions proved inaccurate. Eventually, skeptics uncovered another possibility. As a child, Virginia had lived near an Irish immigrant whose stories and expressions may have remained buried in her subconscious for decades. Psychologists suggested that forgotten childhood memories had resurfaced during hypnosis. The phenomenon became one of the earliest widely discussed examples of cryptomnesia. Supporters remained unconvinced. They argued that the amount of historical detail exceeded what could reasonably have been remembered from childhood conversations. More than 70 years later, the debate continues. The Bridey-Murphy case remains a landmark not because it resolved the question of reincarnation, but because it demonstrated how extraordinarily difficult such cases are to interpret. Another remarkable story unfolded in Egypt. It involved a woman named Dorothy Eady. Born in London in 1904, Dorothy suffered a serious accident as a young child. According to family accounts, she fell down a flight of stairs and was believed to have died briefly before unexpectedly reviving. After the accident, something changed dramatically. Dorothy insisted that England was not her real home. She repeatedly told her parents she wanted to return to her people. As she grew older, she developed an extraordinary fascination with ancient Egypt. When shown photographs of Egyptian temples in the British Museum, she reportedly became emotional. She identified specific locations as though she had visited them personally. Eventually, Dorothy moved to Egypt, where she became known as Seti. She worked alongside respected archaeologists and developed an impressive knowledge of ancient Egyptian history. What made her unusual was her insistence that she remembered a previous life as a temple priestess named Bentreshid during the reign of Pharaoh Seti I. She described details about temple layouts, gardens, and ceremonial practices. Supporters claimed that several archaeological discoveries later confirmed information she had described years earlier. Critics responded that Dorothy had devoted her life to studying Egyptian history and likely possessed exceptional scholarly knowledge rather than supernatural memories. Regardless of interpretation, Seti became one of the most respected Egyptologists of her generation. Even those who rejected her reincarnation claims admired her remarkable historical expertise. If Dorothy Eady's story remains controversial, another case from India has been studied for nearly a century. The story begins with a little girl named Shanti Devi. Born in Delhi in 1926, Shanti began speaking about another family when she was only 4 years old. She insisted her real home was in the city of Mathura. She gave the names of her husband and relatives. She described her house in considerable detail. Most astonishingly, she claimed she had died shortly after giving birth to a son. At first, her parents assumed she was playing games. As the years passed, however, Shanti continued repeating the same story with remarkable consistency. Eventually, local newspapers became interested. Investigators traveled to Mathura. To their surprise, they discovered that a woman matching Shanti's descriptions had indeed lived there. Her name was Lugdi Devi. She had died after childbirth several years before Shanti's birth. When members of Lugdi Devi's family visited Delhi, Shanti reportedly recognized them immediately. She identified her former husband among a group of strangers. She recalled private details that relatives claimed were not publicly known. The case attracted national attention. Even Mahatma Gandhi authorized an investigative committee to examine the evidence. Although skeptics argued that information could somehow have been communicated to the child, no completely satisfactory explanation emerged. Today, the Shanti Devi case remains one of the most frequently cited examples in reincarnation research. While these stories involved adults or older children, another researcher focused almost entirely on very young children. His name was Dr. Ian Stevenson. Born in Canada in 1918, Stevenson trained as a psychiatrist and eventually became chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia. Unlike many writers on reincarnation, Stevenson approached the subject with extraordinary caution. He was not interested in hypnosis. Instead, he investigated spontaneous childhood memories. Over a period of more than 40 years, Stevenson documented over 2,000 cases from around the world. His method was meticulous. Whenever possible, he interviewed children before their statements could be influenced by investigators. He recorded names, places, occupations, and descriptions exactly as the children reported them. Only afterward did researchers attempt to verify the information. Many cases involved children between the ages of 2 and 5. They often began speaking about previous lives shortly after learning to talk. Interestingly, these memories usually faded as the children grew older. Stevenson noticed several recurring patterns. Many children described dying suddenly. Some displayed intense fears corresponding to the manner of death they described. Children claiming to have drowned often developed severe fear of water. Those recalling deaths by fire sometimes became terrified of flames. Others refused to wear certain clothing or insisted on eating foods associated with the culture they claimed to remember. Perhaps most intriguing were birthmarks. Stevenson documented hundreds of cases in which children possessed unusual birthmarks or birth defects corresponding, according to medical records, with fatal injuries sustained by the deceased individuals they claimed to have been. One child born with a missing finger remembered losing the same finger in a farming accident during an apparent previous life. Another possessed birthmarks matching the entrance and exit wounds described in an autopsy report. Supporters regard these cases as among the strongest evidence for reincarnation. Critics argue that coincidence, selective reporting, and confirmation bias cannot be ruled out. Stevenson himself remained cautious throughout his career. He rarely claimed proof. Instead, he repeatedly stated that the evidence appeared worthy of serious scientific investigation. Following Stevenson's retirement, psychiatrist Dr. Jim Tucker continued much of this research at the University of Virginia. Tucker has investigated dozens of additional childhood cases while applying modern psychological methods. Perhaps the most famous concerns a young American boy named James Leininger. From the age of 2, James suffered terrifying nightmares. He repeatedly screamed that his airplane had crashed. He spoke about burning, about being trapped, about a ship called the Natoma. His parents initially dismissed these episodes as childhood imagination. As James grew older, however, the details became increasingly specific. He identified the type of aircraft. He named fellow servicemen. He described being shot down during World War II. Researchers eventually connected many of James's statements with the life of James Houston Jr., a naval pilot who died during the Battle of Iwo Jima. Supporters argue that the correspondence is extraordinary. Skeptics suggest that subtle parental influence, exposure to historical material, and selective memory may explain much of the case. Again, certainty remains elusive. Another fascinating pattern appears in cultures that do not traditionally believe in reincarnation. One might expect reports of previous lives only where such beliefs are widespread. Yet researchers have documented similar childhood cases in Europe, North America, and parts of Africa where reincarnation is not commonly taught. This has prompted some investigators to suggest that cultural expectations alone cannot account for every reported experience. Others caution that global media exposure makes it increasingly difficult to separate cultural influence from genuine spontaneity. Past life regression therapists also report occasional historical details that appear surprisingly accurate. Clients sometimes describe unfamiliar architecture, ancient tools, forgotten customs, or obsolete words. Occasionally, researchers discover that these details correspond with historical records. At other times, they prove entirely incorrect. This mixture of apparent accuracy and obvious error has become one of the greatest challenges facing the field. If regression memories were genuine historical recall, why are they not consistently accurate? Conversely, if they are entirely imaginary, why do some contain obscure information the individual appears unlikely to have known? No explanation fully resolves both questions. Some psychologists propose that the subconscious mind possesses an astonishing ability to assemble fragments of forgotten information into coherent narratives. Others believe that intuition, coincidence, or unconscious pattern recognition may account for the apparent successes. Still others suggest that entirely new models of consciousness may eventually be required. At present, none of these possibilities has been conclusively demonstrated. What makes these famous cases so enduring is not that they prove reincarnation. They do not. Rather, they illustrate how complex the question truly is. Some accounts can be explained reasonably well through psychology. Others remain difficult to categorize. A few continue to puzzle even experienced investigators. The deeper researchers look, the more they encounter both compelling observations and significant uncertainties. Perhaps the greatest lesson offered by these famous cases is that extraordinary claims deserve both open-minded curiosity and careful scrutiny. Neither unquestioning belief nor automatic dismissal advances understanding. The evidence must be examined patiently, critically, and honestly. Yet even if every historical case could eventually be explained through ordinary psychology, one important question would still remain. Why do so many people report profound emotional healing after past life regression? How can experiences that may never have literally happened transform lives so dramatically? To answer that question, we must now leave history behind and turn to modern science. What actually happens inside the brain during hypnosis? Can neuroscience explain these extraordinary experiences? Or does consciousness still hold secrets we have yet to discover? Chapter 7, Scientific Explanations. What does modern science say? Whenever extraordinary claims are made, science asks an important question. What is the evidence? Past life regression presents scientists with a unique challenge. Millions of people sincerely believe they have experienced memories from previous lives. Many describe these memories with extraordinary clarity. Some report emotional healing that lasts for years. Others insist they recalled historical details they had no ordinary way of knowing. Yet sincerity alone cannot establish factual truth. Human beings can experience events that feel completely real without those events having occurred exactly as remembered. Modern psychology has demonstrated this repeatedly. The scientific challenge, therefore, is not determining whether people truly had these experiences. Clearly they did. The challenge is determining what produced them. One of the first explanations offered by psychologists involves the nature of memory itself. Most people imagine memories as recordings stored somewhere inside the brain, like videos waiting to be replayed. Neuroscience tells a different story. Memory is remarkably flexible. Each time we remember an event, the brain reconstructs it. It pieces together sights, sounds, emotions, knowledge, expectations. Rather than retrieving a perfect recording, it rebuilds the experience from many different neural networks. This process works remarkably well most of the time. But it also leaves room for error. Details can change. New information may become blended with older memories. Emotions can alter how events are interpreted. Over time, people may become absolutely certain about memories that differ significantly from what actually occurred. Researchers have demonstrated this in hundreds of laboratory experiments. Participants have been persuaded they were once lost in shopping malls as children. Others became convinced they had taken hot air balloon rides that never happened. Some remembered shaking hands with fictional cartoon characters. These false memories often felt completely authentic. Participants were not pretending. They genuinely believed the events had taken place. This discovery has profound implications for past life regression. If entirely fictional memories can be created unintentionally, could regression experiences arise through similar psychological processes? Many scientists believe they can. One factor frequently discussed is suggestion. Suggestion does not mean deception. Nor does it imply weakness. Every human being is influenced by suggestion to some degree. Expectations shape perception. Questions influence memory. Even subtle wording can affect how experiences are interpreted. Imagine someone asks, "What color was the red car?" Without realizing it, the question assumes the car was red. A person uncertain of the original event may unknowingly accept that assumption. Hypnosis increases focused attention. During this state, individuals often become more responsive to suggestion. A skilled therapist can help someone relax deeply. Unfortunately, an unskilled therapist may also unintentionally influence what the client experiences. This is why ethical regression practitioners are careful to ask neutral questions. Instead of saying, "Go back to your previous life," They may ask. Describe whatever comes into your awareness. The distinction is subtle but important. Leading questions increase the risk of creating false memories. Open-ended questions reduce that possibility. Even with careful techniques, however, unconscious influence cannot always be eliminated. Another scientific explanation involves imagination. Human imagination is extraordinarily powerful. People can mentally construct entire cities they have never visited. Imagine conversations that never occurred. Create fictional characters with convincing personalities. Novelists do this every day. Under hypnosis, imagination often becomes even more vivid. Some psychologists suggest that regression experiences may represent highly immersive imaginative constructions generated by the subconscious mind. Importantly, this does not make the experience meaningless. Dreams are also products of the imagination. Yet dreams frequently reveal important emotions, fears, hopes, and unresolved conflicts. Regression experiences may function in a similar way. The stories themselves need not be historically accurate in order to produce genuine psychological healing. Closely related to imagination is a phenomenon known as confabulation. Confabulation occurs when the brain automatically fills gaps in memory with plausible information. The individual does not intentionally invent details. Instead, the mind unconsciously creates a coherent narrative. Patients with certain neurological conditions sometimes confabulate without realizing it. Healthy individuals also do so under particular circumstances. When people cannot remember an event completely, the brain often reconstructs missing pieces using logic, expectation, and imagination. This reconstructed memory may feel entirely authentic. Another explanation attracting considerable attention is cryptomnesia. The term literally means hidden memory. Throughout life, we absorb enormous amounts of information. Books, television, movies, conversations, school lessons, documentaries. Much of this information fades from conscious awareness. Yet it may remain stored somewhere within the brain. Years later, forgotten fragments sometimes reappear without any recollection of where they originated. Someone may sincerely believe they are encountering information for the very first time when, in fact, they learned it decades earlier. The Bridey-Murphy case illustrates this possibility. Investigators discovered that Virginia Tighe had spent part of her childhood living near Irish immigrants. Although she consciously remembered little about those early experiences, skeptics argued that forgotten conversations may have resurfaced during hypnosis, creating the impression of a previous life. Whether this explanation accounts for every detail remains debated. Nevertheless, cryptomnesia is a well-documented psychological phenomenon. It reminds researchers that hidden memories can sometimes appear surprisingly mysterious. Neuroscientists have also examined what occurs inside the brain during hypnosis. Brain imaging techniques such as functional MRI have revealed interesting changes. Certain areas involved in focused attention become more active. Regions responsible for self-monitoring and critical evaluation may become less dominant. This combination allows individuals to become deeply absorbed in internal experiences. Importantly, hypnosis does not involve surrendering control. People generally remain aware of their surroundings. They can reject suggestions they find unacceptable. They retain their personal values. They are not unconscious. Instead, attention becomes directed inward. This heightened concentration may explain why mental imagery feels unusually vivid. Researchers studying pain management have demonstrated that hypnosis can significantly alter subjective experience. Individuals undergoing medical procedures sometimes report greatly reduced discomfort. Brain scans confirm measurable changes in pain processing regions. If hypnosis can influence physical pain so dramatically, perhaps it can also reshape memory, emotion, and perception. Another intriguing theory involves dissociation. Psychologists use the term dissociation to describe situations in which different aspects of consciousness temporarily become separated. Many people experience mild dissociation every day. Driving home while barely remembering the journey. becoming completely absorbed in a novel, daydreaming during a long meeting. During hypnosis, this dissociative capacity may increase. Some researchers suggest that apparent past life memories arise because different parts of the mind begin expressing themselves symbolically. Rather than accessing another lifetime, the subconscious creates a narrative representing unresolved emotional conflicts. The story becomes a language through which healing can occur. Not all scientists agree. Some believe existing psychological theories explain most regression experiences. Others acknowledge that certain cases remain unusually difficult to classify. For example, occasional reports contain historical information the participant appears unlikely to have known. Could these be coincidences? Forgotten learning? Lucky guesses? Or evidence that current theories remain incomplete? Science has not yet reached a consensus. Perhaps the most controversial aspect concerns therapeutic effectiveness. Numerous individuals report lasting improvements following past life regression. Phobias disappear. Anxiety lessens. Grief softens. Relationships improve. Fear of death declines. How should science interpret these changes? One possibility is the placebo effect. The placebo effect is often misunderstood. It is not imaginary improvement. Rather, it reflects the brain's remarkable ability to influence healing through expectation and belief. Placebos have produced measurable improvements in pain, depression, Parkinson's disease, and numerous other conditions. If someone believes they have resolved a deep emotional wound, genuine improvement may follow regardless of the literal truth of the memory. Another explanation involves emotional catharsis. Catharsis refers to the release of powerful emotions that have been suppressed or unresolved. Psychotherapy often succeeds because it allows individuals to express grief, fear, anger, or guilt in a safe environment. Past life regression may provide an especially vivid stage upon which these emotions can finally be experienced and released. Whether the narrative represents history or symbolism may be less important than the emotional resolution itself. Interestingly, several controlled studies have suggested that hypnosis, even without past life content, can effectively reduce anxiety, chronic pain, and certain phobias. This raises another possibility. Perhaps the hypnotic state itself contributes substantially to healing. Regression simply provides a meaningful framework through which the mind organizes emotional change. Despite decades of investigation, neuroscience has not discovered any mechanism capable of storing memories from previous biological lives. Current understanding suggests that memories depend upon physical changes within the brain. When the brain dies, those neural connections deteriorate. From this perspective, literal reincarnation presents a profound scientific challenge. Yet some researchers caution against assuming that current knowledge represents the final word. Consciousness itself remains one of science's greatest unsolved mysteries. No universally accepted explanation exists for how subjective awareness emerges from physical brain activity. Some philosophers argue that consciousness may be more fundamental than previously believed. Others strongly disagree. The debate extends far beyond past life regression. It touches the very foundations of neuroscience, philosophy, and physics. At present, science offers several plausible explanations for many features of past life regression. False memory, suggestion, cryptomnesia, confabulation, imagination, dissociation, emotional catharsis, placebo effects. Together, these mechanisms explain a great deal. Whether they explain everything remains uncertain. Perhaps the most honest scientific position is also the most cautious. Many aspects of past life regression can be understood through well-established psychological principles. Some aspects remain difficult to explain completely. Difficulty, however, should not be mistaken for proof. Nor should unexplained observations be dismissed simply because they challenge existing theories. Good science remains open to new evidence while demanding rigorous investigation. Yet science is only one way of approaching this mystery. For countless people around the world, past life regression is not primarily about proving reincarnation. It is about understanding the soul, learning life's deeper lessons, recognizing connections that seem to stretch across centuries. To understand that perspective, we must now turn from laboratories and neuroscience to the spiritual traditions that have shaped humanity's understanding of reincarnation for thousands of years. Chapter 8: Spiritual Perspectives, The Journey of the Soul. While scientists search for explanations within the brain, countless spiritual traditions begin from an entirely different starting point. They suggest that consciousness is not created by the brain. Instead, the brain functions more like a receiver, a temporary instrument through which consciousness expresses itself during a single lifetime. When the body dies, the instrument ceases to function, but consciousness itself continues. This idea has appeared throughout human history. Different cultures describe it using different words. Some speak of the soul. Others refer to spirit. Still others describe pure awareness. Regardless of the terminology, many traditions agree on one fundamental principle. Life on Earth is not the beginning of consciousness, nor is death its end. Instead, each lifetime represents only one chapter in a much longer journey. According to many spiritual teachings, the purpose of reincarnation is growth, not punishment, not reward. Growth. Just as a child gradually matures through years of learning, the soul is believed to mature through many lifetimes. Each incarnation offers new opportunities, new relationships, new challenges, new lessons. Some lives may be filled with comfort, others with hardship. Some may involve wealth, others poverty. Some may be marked by peace, others by conflict. From the spiritual perspective, none of these experiences are accidental. Each contributes to the soul's evolution. One of the most widely discussed concepts associated with reincarnation is karma. Few spiritual ideas have been more misunderstood. In everyday conversation, karma is often described as instant justice. Someone behaves badly, and something unpleasant quickly happens to them. Someone performs a kind act, and good fortune follows. Traditional teachings present a far more sophisticated picture. Karma is not cosmic revenge, nor is it a system of rewards and punishments administered by an external authority. Instead, karma is often described as a universal law of cause and effect. Every thought, every intention, every action creates consequences. Some consequences appear immediately. Others may unfold years later. Still others, according to reincarnation traditions, may carry forward into future lives. Imagine dropping a pebble into a still pond. The ripple spreads outward long after the pebble disappears beneath the surface. In much the same way, spiritual traditions suggest that our choices continue influencing the future long after individual events have passed. This does not mean that every hardship represents punishment for previous actions. Most spiritual teachers reject such simplistic interpretations. Instead, they emphasize learning rather than blame. Difficult experiences may offer opportunities to develop compassion, patience, forgiveness, humility, courage, qualities that cannot always be acquired through comfort alone. Many regression practitioners report that clients frequently encounter this idea during hypnosis. They describe understanding difficult relationships in a completely new way. A person who caused great pain in one lifetime may return in another under entirely different circumstances. Roles appear to reverse. Lessons continue. The goal is not revenge. It is understanding. Another fascinating concept found in many spiritual teachings is that of soul groups. According to this idea, we do not journey through lifetimes alone. Instead, we travel with a relatively consistent group of souls. These companions may appear as parents in one life, children in another, friends, teachers, enemies, spouses, even strangers whose brief interactions permanently change our lives. From this perspective, relationships are far more than random encounters. They are opportunities for mutual growth. Many people who undergo past life regression describe an immediate sense of recognition when encountering certain individuals. They often say they felt they had known someone forever despite meeting only recently. Psychologists refer to this as familiarity. Spiritual traditions sometimes describe it as remembering a fellow traveler from previous incarnations. Neither explanation can be proven. Yet the experience itself is remarkably common. Closely related to soul groups is the idea of soul contracts. This concept suggests that before birth, souls voluntarily agree to experience particular circumstances. Not because suffering is desirable, but because certain lessons require specific challenges. Within this framework, families are not assigned by chance. They are chosen. Major life events may also form part of a broader spiritual plan. Some regression clients claim to remember these planning sessions. They describe meeting guides or teachers before birth, reviewing possible lifetimes, considering different opportunities for growth, choosing families, discussing future challenges. Again, these reports resemble certain near-death experiences in which individuals claim to review life from a higher perspective. Whether these accounts represent genuine spiritual memories or symbolic narratives remains unknown. Nevertheless, the similarities are striking. One question naturally follows. If souls plan their lives before birth, why do we forget? Many spiritual traditions answer this through what is sometimes called the veil of forgetting. According to this idea, complete memory of previous lives would interfere with the lessons of the present one. Imagine beginning school already knowing every answer. Learning would become impossible. Similarly, if we remembered every previous joy, every heartbreak, every failure, and every success across hundreds of lifetimes, living fully in the present might become extraordinarily difficult. Forgetting allows each life to unfold naturally. The soul may remember. The conscious personality does not. Some traditions describe this forgetting symbolically. Others interpret it literally. Regardless of the explanation, many regression participants report that recovering even fragments of apparent previous memories transforms the way they view their current lives. They begin seeing recurring patterns. Certain fears suddenly make sense. Long-standing attractions to specific cultures or historical periods feel less mysterious. Relationships take on new meaning. One of the most profound themes emerging from spiritual literature concerns unconditional love. Regression clients frequently describe encountering beings who radiate complete acceptance. There is no condemnation, no ridicule, no shame. Instead, they speak of feeling understood at the deepest possible level. Many say they realized they had been judging themselves far more harshly than any spiritual presence ever did. This idea appears repeatedly across spiritual traditions. Growth occurs not through fear, but through understanding. Not through punishment, but through love. Many people find this perspective deeply comforting. Others question whether it reflects objective reality or simply humanity's longing for acceptance. The discussion remains open. Another commonly reported experience involves life reviews. Although often associated with near-death experiences, life reviews also appear in many regression accounts. Individuals describe observing important moments from multiple perspectives. Not only seeing what they did, but experiencing how their actions affected others. A careless word spoken decades earlier may be felt from the perspective of the person who heard it. A simple act of kindness may reveal consequences that continued for years. According to many spiritual teachings, the purpose of the life review is not judgment. It is education. The soul learns directly from experience. Compassion becomes impossible to fake because one literally experiences the effects of one's own actions. Whether understood spiritually or psychologically, this concept encourages personal responsibility without relying upon external punishment. Some traditions also speak of spiritual guides. These guides are not generally viewed as beings who make decisions for us. Instead, they are described as teachers, mentors, or companions. Regression participants sometimes report encountering one guide. Others describe several. The identities vary enormously. Some appear as radiant human figures. Others are perceived only as voices or presences. Still others cannot be described visually at all. Many experiencers emphasize that communication occurs without spoken language. Understanding simply appears. Entire conversations seem to unfold instantaneously. Again, this closely parallels numerous near-death experience reports. Perhaps one of the most beautiful spiritual concepts is that every lifetime contributes to a larger masterpiece. Imagine viewing only one frame from a full-length motion picture. Without the surrounding scenes, the story would make little sense. Spiritual tradition suggests that a single lifetime resembles one frame within a much larger journey. Events that seem unfair today may fit into a broader pattern extending across many incarnations. Whether this perspective is objectively true cannot currently be demonstrated. Yet for many people, it provides a profound sense of meaning. Suffering becomes something to understand rather than simply endure. Relationships become opportunities for growth rather than random encounters. Death becomes a transition rather than an ending. Not surprisingly, these ideas have attracted both admiration and criticism. Supporters argue that reincarnation offers one of the most hopeful visions of human existence ever proposed. It allows unlimited opportunities to learn, to improve, to correct mistakes, to continue growing. Critics raise important ethical questions. Could belief in karma lead people to blame victims for their suffering? Might serious social problems be dismissed as merely the consequences of previous lives? Responsible spiritual teachers generally reject such interpretations. They emphasize compassion above speculation. Helping those who suffer remains a moral obligation regardless of the ultimate cause of suffering. In many ways, this emphasis on compassion forms the common ground shared by both spiritual traditions and modern psychology. Whether healing occurs through divine guidance, symbolic storytelling, emotional processing, or neurological change, the result often appears similar. People become kinder, more patient, less fearful, more forgiving. Perhaps this explains why past life regression continues attracting interest across cultures and belief systems. It is not simply about discovering who someone may once have been. It is about understanding who they are becoming. Yet there remains one final question. Even if past life regression cannot conclusively prove reincarnation, can it still help people heal? Can confronting an apparent memory, whether literal or symbolic, transform emotional suffering in measurable ways? Modern therapists have spent decades exploring exactly that possibility. Their findings, while sometimes controversial, are among the most fascinating aspects of the entire field. Chapter 9: Healing through Regression, Therapy, Transformation, and Personal Growth. For many people, the question of whether past life regression proves reincarnation is actually secondary. Their primary concern is much simpler. Can it help? Can it relieve suffering? Can it explain fears that seem to have no obvious cause? Can it bring peace to someone carrying emotional pain for decades? These questions have become the focus of many therapists who use regression techniques. Some openly believe they are helping clients recover genuine memories from previous lifetimes. Others make no such claim. Instead, they view the experience as a therapeutic exercise, one that allows the subconscious mind to express itself through powerful stories and symbolism. Regardless of the explanation, many practitioners report that meaningful emotional change often follows a successful regression session. One of the most frequently discussed applications involves phobias. Nearly everyone has experienced fear. Fear serves an important purpose. It protects us from danger. Without fear, human beings would take reckless risks and place themselves in constant harm. A phobia, however, is something different. A phobia is an intense, persistent fear that appears greatly out of proportion to the actual situation. Someone may experience overwhelming terror while standing on a balcony, even though the structure is perfectly safe. Another person may panic at the sight of a harmless spider. Some fear enclosed spaces. Others are terrified of open spaces. Flying, water, fire, heights, darkness, needles, crowds, animals. Many phobias develop after traumatic experiences. Someone who nearly drowned may naturally fear deep water. A child bitten by a dog may become anxious around animals. Psychology explains many phobias extremely well. Yet therapists occasionally encounter fears with no obvious origin. The individual cannot remember any event that explains the intensity of the emotion. Some regression therapists believe these unexplained fears may be connected to experiences from apparent previous lives. A person terrified of drowning may recall dying at sea. Someone with an overwhelming fear of fire may experience a regression involving a house fire centuries earlier. Whether these memories represent literal history or symbolic metaphors, some clients report remarkable improvement afterward. The fear does not always disappear completely, but it often becomes manageable. Traditional psychologists offer several possible explanations. The regression provides emotional catharsis. The subconscious creates a symbolic narrative that gives meaning to an otherwise unexplained fear. The individual finally feels they understand the emotion, allowing the brain to release its grip on it. Regardless of the mechanism, the therapeutic outcome can be significant. Regression therapy has also been used with recurring nightmares. Nightmares differ from ordinary bad dreams. They often repeat the same themes over many years. A child dreams of falling from a great height. An adult repeatedly dreams of being chased through unfamiliar streets. Someone awakens night after night with vivid images of battlefields, drowning, or imprisonment. Some regression practitioners guide clients to explore these dream images during hypnosis. Occasionally, participants describe what appears to be an entire lifetime connected with the recurring dream. Again, the question of historical accuracy remains open. What often matters more is the emotional resolution that follows. The nightmare gradually loses its emotional intensity. Sleep improves. Anxiety decreases. Another area where regression is sometimes used involves relationships. Almost everyone has experienced meeting someone who immediately feels familiar. There may be no logical explanation. The person is a stranger. Yet the connection feels strangely comfortable. Conversely, some individuals experience immediate tension with people they have just met. No obvious conflict exists. Still, an unexplained emotional reaction appears almost instantly. Regression practitioners sometimes suggest these relationships may reflect previous interactions between souls. Clients occasionally describe recognizing current family members in entirely different roles. A present-day daughter may appear as a mother in another apparent lifetime. A close friend may once have been a sibling. A difficult coworker may emerge as an old rival. Whether understood literally or symbolically, these stories often encourage forgiveness. People begin seeing relationships from a broader perspective. Instead of asking, "Why is this person making my life difficult?" they begin asking, "What am I supposed to learn from this relationship?" That subtle shift in perspective can dramatically influence emotional well-being. Grief represents another area where some individuals seek regression therapy. The death of a loved one often leaves unanswered questions. Could the relationship continue in some way? Will we meet again? Many regression participants report encounters with deceased relatives while exploring apparent previous lives or the period between incarnations. Some describe conversations. Others simply experience overwhelming feelings of love and reassurance. Whether these encounters reflect genuine spiritual experiences or the healing capacity of the subconscious mind remains impossible to determine. Yet many grieving individuals describe finding comfort after such sessions. They no longer view death with the same fear they once carried. One of the more controversial uses of regression therapy involves chronic physical pain. A small number of practitioners believe certain unexplained pains may relate to traumatic experiences recalled during regression. For example, a client suffering persistent neck pain might describe an apparent execution in another lifetime. Someone with unexplained chest discomfort may recall a battlefield injury. Supporters report occasional improvements after these experiences. Conventional medicine urges considerable caution. Physical symptoms should always receive proper medical evaluation. Regression should never replace evidence-based diagnosis or treatment. Even therapists who strongly support past life regression generally agree on this point. Psychological exploration should complement medical care, not substitute for it. Many clients seek regression not because of fear or illness, but because of recurring life patterns. Some repeatedly enter unhealthy relationships. Others struggle with self-confidence despite years of success. Certain individuals sabotage opportunities whenever happiness seems within reach. Regression experiences often provide symbolic narratives through which these patterns become easier to understand. Perhaps a client imagines a lifetime dominated by greed. Another recalls abandoning loved ones in pursuit of ambition. Whether historically true or psychologically symbolic, these stories frequently encourage self-reflection. The emphasis shifts from blame to growth. What lesson remains unfinished? What behavior keeps repeating? How can that cycle finally be broken? Forgiveness emerges as one of the most consistent themes reported by regression clients. Many discover that anger carried for years begins dissolving after viewing painful experiences from a broader perspective. Instead of seeing only suffering, they begin recognizing shared human struggles. Some report forgiving parents, former partners, friends, even themselves. Modern psychology recognizes forgiveness as an important contributor to emotional well-being. Regression may simply provide another pathway toward achieving it. Interestingly, therapists often observe changes extending far beyond the original reason for seeking treatment. Individuals frequently become less materialistic, less competitive, more compassionate, more patient. They describe greater appreciation for everyday life. Fear of death often diminishes dramatically. This transformation closely resembles the aftereffects reported by many near-death experience survivors. Researchers have documented these personality changes repeatedly. Whether they result from spiritual awakening or profound psychological insight remains an open question. Either way, the changes themselves are often genuine. Not every regression produces dramatic healing. This point is important. Some clients experience vivid imagery without noticeable emotional improvement. Others struggle to enter hypnosis at all. Still others remain uncertain whether anything meaningful occurred. Like any therapeutic technique, regression does not work equally well for everyone. Responsible practitioners acknowledge these limitations. Unfortunately, as past life regression has grown in popularity, so too have concerns about exaggerated claims. Some individuals advertise guaranteed access to previous lives. Others promise miraculous healing. Such promises should be approached with caution. No responsible therapist can guarantee that someone will experience a past life memory. Nor can anyone honestly promise complete recovery from serious psychological or medical conditions through regression alone. Professional organizations generally emphasize informed consent. Clients should understand both the potential benefits and the limitations. They should know that memories emerging during hypnosis cannot automatically be assumed to represent historical fact. The experience may be symbolic, metaphorical, imaginative, or something else entirely. Maintaining this balanced perspective protects both therapists and clients. Ethics have therefore become increasingly important within regression practice. Competent practitioners avoid leading questions. They avoid imposing personal beliefs. They encourage critical thinking rather than unquestioning acceptance. Their goal is not to convince clients they have lived before. Their goal is to facilitate exploration in a safe and supportive environment. Perhaps one of the most meaningful outcomes reported by regression participants is a renewed sense of purpose. People often leave sessions believing that their lives have greater significance than they previously imagined. Challenges become opportunities. Relationships become teachers. Mistakes become lessons rather than permanent failures. Whether this perspective reflects objective spiritual reality or a powerful psychological reframe, it often encourages healthier, more hopeful living. Ultimately, healing may be one area where the debate over reincarnation becomes less important. If an experience helps someone become kinder, more compassionate, less fearful, more forgiving, then something valuable has occurred. Exactly how it occurred remains a matter of ongoing investigation. After more than a century of research, countless therapy sessions, thousands of personal testimonies, and decades of scientific debate, one final question remains. What can we honestly say we know? Where does the evidence lead? And what mysteries continue waiting beyond the limits of current understanding? Those questions bring us to the conclusion of our journey. Chapter 10: What do we really know? For thousands of years, humanity has searched for answers to one of its oldest and most profound questions. Does life continue after death? The idea of reincarnation has survived the rise and fall of civilizations. It has crossed continents, inspired religions, influenced philosophers, comforted grieving families, motivated ethical living, and, in modern times, become the subject of psychological investigation and scientific curiosity. Past life regression stands at the center of that mystery. For some, it represents evidence that consciousness survives physical death. For others, it reveals the astonishing creative power of the human subconscious. For many, it remains something in between. A doorway into questions we have only begun to explore. Throughout this audiobook, we have examined the subject from many different perspectives. We have traveled back to the ancient civilizations that first taught the soul's journey through multiple lifetimes. We have explored the development of hypnosis and its transformation into a respected therapeutic tool. We have followed the remarkable story of Dr. Brian Weiss and the patient who forever changed the direction of his career. We have examined famous cases that continue to challenge both believers and skeptics. We have looked closely at what modern neuroscience, psychology, and memory research tell us about the human mind. Finally, we have explored the spiritual traditions that view life not as a single existence, but as one chapter in an ongoing journey of consciousness. After examining all of this information, one conclusion becomes clear. The subject is far more complex than many people imagine. Those convinced that every regression reveals a genuine previous lifetime may underestimate the extraordinary abilities of the human mind. Memory is flexible. Imagination is powerful. Suggestion can influence perception. The subconscious possesses remarkable creative abilities that science is still working to understand. At the same time, those who dismiss every regression experience as fantasy may also be overlooking important questions. Some reported cases remain difficult to explain. Young children occasionally describe lives they seemingly had no opportunity to learn about. Certain historical details uncovered during regression appear surprisingly accurate. Many participants undergo profound and lasting emotional transformation. None of these observations prove reincarnation. Neither do they disappear simply because they are difficult to explain. Science has always advanced by investigating anomalies rather than ignoring them. History reminds us that today's mystery sometimes becomes tomorrow's accepted knowledge. There was a time when invisible bacteria seemed impossible. When meteorites were dismissed as superstition because stones could not fall from the sky. When continental drift was considered absurd. When surgeons operated without understanding germs. Questioning accepted ideas has often led to scientific progress. That does not mean every extraordinary claim eventually proves true. It does remind us that genuine curiosity requires both skepticism and open-mindedness. The most productive approach is neither blind belief nor automatic rejection. Instead, it is careful observation, thoughtful investigation, and intellectual honesty. Perhaps the greatest lesson offered by past life regression is not about reincarnation at all. Perhaps it is about the remarkable complexity of consciousness itself. Despite extraordinary advances in neuroscience, consciousness remains one of science's greatest unsolved mysteries. Researchers understand how neurons communicate, how memories form, how emotions influence behavior. Yet no one fully understands how subjective awareness arises. Why does experience feel like something? How do billions of neurons produce a sense of self? Can consciousness exist independently of the brain? Or is it entirely generated by physical processes? These questions extend far beyond past life regression. They touch philosophy, physics, neuroscience, artificial intelligence, even cosmology. Every year brings new discoveries. Yet the mystery remains. For many individuals, past life regression has little to do with proving the existence of previous lives. Instead, it becomes a catalyst for personal growth. People often report becoming more compassionate, less judgmental, more forgiving. They place greater value on relationships than possessions. Fear of death frequently decreases. Appreciation for everyday life increases. Whether these changes arise from genuine spiritual insight or powerful psychological transformation may ultimately matter less than the changes themselves. Researchers studying both near-death experiences and past life regression have repeatedly documented similar aftereffects. Participants often become more patient, more generous, more interested in helping others. Many describe an increased sense of interconnectedness with humanity. Curiously, these personality changes appear remarkably consistent despite participants coming from different cultures, religions, and backgrounds. That consistency itself deserves thoughtful attention. Another important lesson concerns uncertainty. Human beings naturally seek definite answers. We like clear conclusions. True, false, proven, disproven. Reality is not always so accommodating. Many of history's greatest questions remain unanswered for long periods of time. Past life regression belongs within that category. The available evidence does not allow us to state with certainty that reincarnation exists. Neither does it permit us to conclude that every reported experience can be completely explained by existing psychological theories. The honest position lies somewhere between certainty and dismissal. It is entirely possible to acknowledge extraordinary experiences while also recognizing the limitations of current knowledge. Doing so requires intellectual humility. Humility has always been one of science's greatest strengths. It allows researchers to say, "We do not yet know." Those 4 words have often opened the door to humanity's greatest discoveries. Perhaps one day advances in neuroscience will fully explain regression experiences through known brain processes. Perhaps future discoveries about consciousness will reveal possibilities scarcely imagined today. Perhaps the answer will combine elements of both perspectives in ways that neither believers nor skeptics currently anticipate. Only time will tell. One question, however, deserves consideration regardless of where one stands on reincarnation. Why do stories matter so much? Throughout history, human beings have understood themselves through narrative. Religions tell stories. Cultures preserve stories. Families pass stories from one generation to the next. Psychotherapy often succeeds by helping people rewrite the stories they tell themselves about who they are. Past life regression may represent another form of narrative. Whether those narratives arise from literal previous lives, symbolic imagination, or some process not yet understood, they often help individuals organize experience into meaningful patterns. Meaning itself has extraordinary psychological power. People who find meaning in suffering often recover more successfully than those who see only chaos. People who discover purpose frequently become more resilient. Hope influences healing. Purpose influences behavior. Perspective influences emotional well-being. Perhaps this explains why past life regression continues attracting interest despite ongoing controversy. It offers people a larger framework through which to understand their lives. For some, that framework is spiritual. For others, psychological. Either way, it encourages reflection. Who am I? Why am I here? What lessons am I learning? How should I treat other people? What kind of legacy will I leave behind? These questions remain valuable whether one believes in reincarnation or not. If there is only one life, living it with kindness becomes profoundly important. If there are many lives, kindness may become even more significant. Either conclusion points toward compassion. Throughout nearly every spiritual tradition and philosophical system, one principle appears again and again: love, compassion, forgiveness, service to others. These values emerge regardless of differing beliefs about what happens after death. Perhaps that shared message deserves as much attention as the debate itself. One day, science may fully explain every aspect of consciousness. Or perhaps consciousness will prove to be far stranger than we currently imagine. Until then, the mystery remains. Past life regression invites us to stand at the edge of that mystery. Not to abandon reason. Not to reject evidence. But to remain curious. To ask thoughtful questions. To explore extraordinary experiences with both wonder and discernment. Whether the memories uncovered during regression belong to previous lifetimes, or whether they arise from the extraordinary depths of the subconscious mind, they remind us of something deeply human. Every person longs to understand where they came from, why they are here, and where the journey ultimately leads. Perhaps those questions are as important as the answers themselves. For it is in seeking understanding, in remaining open to discovery, and in treating one another with wisdom and compassion, that we continue the greatest journey of all, the journey of human consciousness. And perhaps, if there is truth in the ancient teachings, the journey of the soul itself.